All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Eric. I am well on my way to financial freedom. Just a little background on myself, just to give you some insight on like where I've come from at least and where my wife and I are headed. So, about 4 years ago, graduated college, sales role, working 8 to 12 hours a day from the time that I left my house to the time that we came home. And that was a job where I would door knock, essentially selling people appointments for our sales reps to come out and give an estimate or give a sales pitch basically on windows and roofing and doors and exterior home remodeling. And that was a job that I quickly learned that I was good at because I can talk to people and I can give people a no-brainer solution as to why they would consider it. So fast forward a couple months in, it was quickly understood that this would not be the career that I would want to do for 20 years, to even 40 years, not even 5 years. So I was looking around, making decent money, especially for someone coming out of college. Like I think my first year I made 60,000 clean, like after everything, which is, not bad, but I valued more of the hustle mentality more than anything. Like I was basically leveraging the sales role to give myself an upper hand in something else. And it was funny enough, I was talking with one of my coworkers one day just about like making money and investing and just like what do you do with your money. And he had recommended to read one book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he recommended the podcast Bigger Pockets. And actually, no, it was the podcast that I first listened to, and they recommended the book. So it was like I have this podcast that I've never heard of. It was about real estate investing, and I was like, this is really interesting. Let me listen to it. And I listened to it on the way home that night from work and loved it. It was so jam packed with information. I learned a ton of stuff just about real estate investing. I think the next couple days, maybe that day, I bought the host's book, Brandon Turner's book, the book on real estate investing. I read that in like a day or two, just scoured through it, and learned about something called house hacking, which is essentially where you live in the property and you rent out a portion of the house, maybe other rooms or an accessory dwelling unit or another unit if you have a duplex, something like that. And you can get into the house for very low money down because you're physically living there. It's your primary residence, and you just so happen to rent out other rooms, and that worked out great because you can get a down payment on the property significantly lower than you can in other areas or other facets, right? So traditionally, 20% down is a normal way of thinking, and that's what most people do. But with a FHA loan, or if you're doing house hacking where you're living in the property, you can get a first-time home buyer's loan, where essentially you are going to get a property for 3.5% down plus closing costs. So we looked around at the time. The most valuable property that we could find in our neighborhood next to my wife's work was a property for right about $200,000, and then 3.5% of that plus a couple closing costs, for I don't know 1 to 2% of the property value, ended up us coming out of pocket like $15,000 all in, which is a lot for most people, and that's totally understandable. But you save up for a couple months, and like the first deal is always the slowest. So we ended up going into that property for like 7,000 down, and then the other 7,000 or 8,000 was like closing costs and like transaction fees and appraisals and crap like that. So we get the property, Airbnb, the garage apartment that was converted, ended up cutting our mortgage to $200 or $300 towards the tail end whenever we renovated everything. So when we first started, we were probably making $800 a month, and that was short-term rentals. Just every time someone moved out, we would come in, clean it, just do the whole process to make it ready again for the next guest, and then the next person would come in. and that worked. It was successful, but we were like, maybe there's a better way to approach this versus spending half of our day, or I guess multiple days if you look at it from a monthly perspective, as far as time. If we could just do this maybe once or twice a month and make the same money. And that thought came about later. And then it officially happened. Something we officially switched to whenever the HOA said, "Hey, you can't do short-term rentals here. Like, it's not allowed." And that was hilarious because we just sort of bought a house and we're like, whatever, let's just do an Airbnb, and it worked out for the longest time. And then the HOA caught on. I think one of our neighbors ratted us out. Not sure, but they ended up telling us, no, you can't do a short-term rental. You need to do a rental only. There's like, that's the only option. We don't allow short-term. So we're like, all right, cool. Well, we'll turn it into a rental. And we rented out the garage apartment as a rental. And we went from making $800 or $900 a month. Sometimes we make $600, but $600 to $900 a month, with us coming in to clean the property 3 to 5 times a month, maybe more, to cleaning it one time a month, making right around $1,200 a month. And so we literally gained $400 a month on average in income, and we cleaned the property one time a month. So our passive income went way up through the roof. And it was a lot better because the guest quality was also a lot higher, because people having to pay $1,200 up front, or at least $600 to $800, took out a lot of the riffraff, and people coming in for a one night stay or just like a party or something. And that was very helpful for us as far as the clientele, because we would get travel nurses or professionals or wealthy individuals really that are just looking for a place to buy a new property, and they just needed a place to stay for a month just to save up. And our place was affordable, and it was way better option than an actual like home or apartment or renting anything for even a month or two, because those are $1,300, $1,400, $1,500. We did that for a while. Ended up getting a promotion at my window job. I was in the sales role now, so I was selling the actual windows. That ended up working out okay for a while, and then COVID happened, and we were furloughed for 5 or 6 months. And during that period, we were getting, as funny as this is to say, we were making more money from the unemployment than we were from our actual jobs, all things considered, which was wild to see. So we started to see like bigger paychecks, and we're like, okay, cool, let's figure out how we can make this type of money consistently. And towards the end of 2020, I started looking around at opportunities. I reached out to some past coworkers that had left the company in real estate and was asking, how do I, do you know anyone that's involved in real estate, or anyone I can connect with? They ended up getting me in touch with a local real estate developer in the area. And I hit him up, and we had a phone call. It went well. We were, on the same path, and he's like an entrepreneur who makes plenty good money. So after a while, we started talking, and while there wasn't technically an opportunity for me to come in and like begin working, I was able to plant the seed of becoming an employee for him. And being an entrepreneur, it's common to just figure it out. So after a couple months, me just consistently hitting him up probably once a week, just trying to see if there's a change or an adjustment in the work environment. Ended up there was a way for me to come in and help with like the invoicing and the management of everything, just keeping it really simple to operate. So I would come in as a property manager. I ended up starting that job and left my prior company of 3 years and ended up working with them for like 6 months. It was a circus. It was a joke. As much as I learned, I also learned how not to organize a company, and it was basically just do whatever. Like there was no expectations, no guidelines of any kind, and I didn't expect to say like, okay, this is what you do day one. This is what I was expecting, like, these are your tasks, and then do them. And if you have extra time, do this. It was really just, here is the software to track everything. and then that was it. And then they just did their own jobs, their own tasks. And after a while, it became clear that that role wasn't going to benefit much, and it wasn't like there wasn't really a direct impact to the company as far as like productivity. And during this whole period, I think there was a miscommunication because that was what I was under the impression I was brought in to do. One thing led to another, and it was like, now we'll need a bigger impact from you, so we'll need you to do acquisitions, like finding the properties or calling up owners of properties, and also like potentially selling the properties too. So we will, one, have you call people and have people call in asking about the properties, and you'll sell it off. So did that for a while, was actually very successful at it. I was asking for specific metrics of what I need to accomplish, and there was a certain goal of what he would want on a monthly basis for me to bring in, and I did 12 times that in a month as far as leads or opportunities. And all that to say, things fizzled out, and just it was a inconsistent job where I would have to ask to be paid for weeks before they would send payment in, because there was no structure. It was really interesting. Ended up working commission only sales at a digital marketing company for a couple months. Was successful at that. I was the top performer there. Ended up way under the expectation they had set of income was way under what was actually happening. So, or I didn't say that right. So they had set the standard of you will be making $1,200 a sale or whatever, and on commission. Coming in after my first few sales, I did the math, make about $200 a sale, and then after the third month, it's like a recurring revenue thing. I would make $20 for that one client. So I would call 50 to 80 people a day. Would take a couple days to get some sales. When I did sell, it was $200, and then after the second month or the third month, it was like $20. So it would take hundreds of clients at that dollar value, and they were very stringent on like how we would price them. So yeah, $200 a month, and I'd need 10, 15, 20 clients in order to make this even half decent, and that didn't cut it. So I found a tech sales job or B2B sales job, got a solid income and commission and everything like that. Did that for 6 months. Ended up the product was horrible to the point that nobody on the team could sell it, and they all fired us. So I had basically taken all the paychecks that I'd made over those couple months, leveraged it to put into renovating our property that we had this whole time, put in some new renovations to like make the kitchen in the garage apartment really nice, and like essentially make it a completely separate livable unit. It already had a bed and a bathroom that was new, but wanted to put in a kitchen to like cater to a bigger audience in Airbnb. And during this time, I mean, we were basically fully booked throughout the whole month. We were like 100% occupied for like 5 or 6 months straight. So it was great money. And then after we renovated the kitchen, or put in the kitchenette, we looked around and we traveled to Ecuador. And during that time, we realized, the weather's amazing here. Let's figure out how we can live like this everywhere in our hometown, when we go back from vacation. So we looked around while we were in Ecuador and found a handful of states that we were potentially looking at. And then we settled on Ohio. And then we looked around in Ohio and said, okay, Cincinnati looks amazing. And the home prices are way lower than what they are pretty much anywhere as far as what we were looking for, because we wanted a house hack again. So we looked around, ended up finding a really cool home that is that already has a basement and a gym, and there's a shed that is like a partially finished loft area where that could be finished up and turned into another Airbnb as well. And what we'll do, or what we're in the middle of doing, this is the house, we actually moved into it, is we're going to pay down the HELOC, because we used the HELOC from our equity in the previous home during the past 3 years that grew. We used that to pay for this property. We're in the middle of paying that down. Once that's down to a significant amount, we'll then either pull out more of the equity again, or just do maybe like a cost segregation study of sorts to pull out, 30, 50, 60, 80K of equity per property. That would be ideal. But even if it's 30K per property, that's plenty. And do a segregation study to then fund the renovation for the shed, and then also extending the bathroom and renovating most of the kitchen in this house to give us a nice spread on our equity as well. And then we can do a refinance and pay off the HELOC or whatever the case. If we don't pull out any more equity, then that's actually good. We would do a segregation study to write off or take all the depreciation over the 27 and a half years, can then use that for the renovation. So there's a couple tricky ways. Now, where we're at today, working at a really good job, making good money, B2B sales, and also high ticket sales. And that's also great. I'm helping a local investor in the Ohio area sell his program to students, and that's actually very fun. So on top of that, we're looking at buying laundromats right now. We have 3 that we're looking at from the same owner that will potentially just hand it off to us. So that's where we're at today, and catching up to speed. Thank you for staying tuned. And if you have any questions, pop them in the comments below. But until next time, we'll catch you on the flip side, or whatever they say nowadays. But yeah, that's my background story. Feel free to leave any comments below if you have them. But see you next time.